Hey everyone, this is it. The final part in What If I Wrote the Star Wars Sequel Trilogy. If you've missed parts 1 and 2, check the card up here. Hopefully there are a couple of cards just for you to see the first 2 parts. Dad was called away to that galaxy far, far away on an important assignment, but he will be back very soon. Guys, this one is rough, as I don't have many fond feelings towards this movie, but let's see what we can salvage. The Rise of Skywalker, renamed A New Order. Again, I am electing to change the title. With Luke returning for good in the previous film and Rey confirmed as a solo, there is no Skywalker to rise. I know that technically in my version, both Ben and Rey are in the Skywalker line. I also know that in the original version of the film, the name is basically made a symbol of the Jedi, but that part of the film didn't land with me. I found it quite dumb, if I'm being totally honest. And Ben and Rey are both solos in my version. Rise of Solo, while I'm sure would make the Han Solo fans very happy, and they would be totally down for that being the title, it doesn't quite have the same ring to it. So the new title is A New Order. A New Order could mean many things. It could mean victory or death for our heroes, considering the First Order are the bad guys. It also harkens back to A New Hope, which started the Skywalker saga. So it's fitting that a similarly titled film is the one to end this era of Star Wars. Now let's talk about the film itself. While I wouldn't go so far as to call it a dumpster fire, though many have actually used that phrase to refer to The Rise of Skywalker, it is viewed by many as the worst in the sequel trilogy, possibly the worst overall Star Wars film, maligning everything from the story to the acting to the score, which even I have to agree wasn't John Williams' best. I still love him though. Please check another card up here to see us rave about John Williams and other composers. I can understand why people feel this way, as I share some of those feelings. This film's primary goal seems to have been damage control because of the poor fan reception to The Last Jedi. It seems like literally everything from the previous film, including Rose, was either ignored entirely or minimized as much as it possibly could be. The sudden and tragic death of Carrie Fisher likely affected parts of the film as well and forced some people to get creative, but that still doesn't excuse the mess that this film is. The plot is rushed, convoluted, poorly paced, tonally dissonant, and bizarrely absurd in some places, possibly due to having 6 writers, each likely working on separate sections and then smashing them together in the end. The characters are shells of what they were in the first film, with characters like Finn seemingly just along for the ride, Poe being forced into a weird side plot of Rey's bicker partner, and given a vague and ultimately unimportant backstory with Zori Bliss to try to make up for his bafflingly poor choices in The Last Jedi. Like I said, damage control. And other characters are introduced and forgotten about within the matter of minutes. And don't even get me started with that stupid, again, emboldened, highlighted, and underlined, stupid Chewie fake out death. That was probably the worst of shock tactics to keep people interested in a film that I have ever seen. And it just made me angry. I was fully prepared to let the hate flow through me at that moment. I nearly asked if we could just shut the movie off because I was done. I was very done. But even movies that you don't necessarily like have their silver linings and redeeming moments. And mine was in the form of one character. One of the few redeeming parts of The Rise of Skywalker is the return of Billy D. Williams as Lando Calrissian. But some major potential was wasted with him, and his appearance is far too short-lived to do much good. Ultimately, not even Lando's charm could save this movie for me. All that to say, the entire plot is scrapped. Basically, all of the new characters that The Rise of Skywalker introduced are gone as well. Lando will still return, but he's an old friend that we already love, not some forgettable drone. And since in theory, the previous film won't have sparked quite the fan outrage that The Last Jedi did, there won't be anything to retcon. There are always going to be people that don't like something because it wasn't exactly the way they wanted it. But here's the thing. Rian Johnson's future Star Wars films have seemingly been canceled because of the fan outrage. We're moving forward as though The Fallen was well received and doesn't need anything retcon to make others happy and or less nervous about how we continue. Since everything is going to be different because of no clone Palpatine, the opening crawl is entirely different as well. Here we go. The Resistance continues to fight. After managing to escape and disappear from the eyes of the First Order, the Resistance, under the temporary command of Poe Dameron, began to re-establish allies as well as liberate smaller worlds from the First Order's control. Now, a year later, General Organa and her brother, Jedi Master Luke Skywalker, have resumed command of the Resistance, as well as taken Rey Solo under their tutelage to help train her for her inevitable confrontation with her brother Ben Solo, the First Order's Kylo Ren. Skywalker has also been keeping a close eye on Finn, who has made remarkable progress with his training under the guide of Maz Kanata, though he still has much to learn. Now, as the First Order continues to press, the Resistance tries to help the people caught in the crossfire, but with the First Order outnumbering them, their efforts may all be in vain. We open on a ground assault on the world of Onderon. We see the Resistance fighting alongside an Onderon militia. Poe runs across the battlefield, dodging blaster bolts and taking down plenty of stormtroopers. He dives for cover, and there's an explosion near him. He sees that this is where Keela is hiding as well. She would look at him. "Nice of you to join me." He would take out his blaster and say with a smile, "Don't you just love a good old-fashioned ground assault?" She smiles at him. "Ha!" as she stands to take out a pair of stormtroopers with her blasters and then ducks back down. "This is why I stayed a bounty hunter instead of following you into the Resistance the first time." Poe laughs. "This is why I usually stay in the air." They keep standing and taking out stormtroopers, but the troopers just keep coming. Key looks nervous. "I'm not sure how much longer we can hold out without some help." Poe fires his blaster, then looks at the sky. "Help's coming." The Millennium Falcon has flown into the battle. We see Chewie is piloting, and Finn and Rey are standing on the ramp. Chewie gets low enough for Finn and Rey to jump in on the stormtrooper side of the fight. When they land, they ignite their lightsabers. We can see that they are partially made from the remnants of Anakin's broken lightsaber. Rey's is yellow and Finn's is blue. They begin to go to town on the stormtroopers, using both their sabers and the Force. It'll be clear that Finn is more confident with the lightsaber than the Force, but he will use it a bit, while Rey is using both really well. They're staying fairly close to each other as they move through the battle. Key and Poe see that the stormtroopers have begun to focus on the Jedi, and they use this opportunity to lead the Resistance fighters and the militia further into the battle. Before long, the tide has turned, and the stormtroopers are running to their ships, only to have Chewie shoot them down. The battle is won. As the Resistance is gathering the surrendering troopers, the Falcon begins to land, and Poe, Finn, Key, and Rey all meet in the middle of the battlefield. Poe asks what took them so long, and Rey responds that they had to help Rose and Beaumont in the capital city as they were in worse shape than he and Key were. Key asks if they saw BB-8 and K-4 at the Capitol, but right as she asks this, Both droids come off the Falcon, with Chewie following behind them. Finn chuckles. They refused to stay behind when they heard Poe's distress signal. Poe raises an eyebrow. There was no distress, just a healthy concern about the likelihood of our survival. BB-8 whirls around Poe's and Key's legs, while K4 says he's glad they survived, as he did not want to take care of BB-8 alone for the rest of their existence. Poe and Keela laugh, with Poe saying that Finn would take care of them. Finn replying, BB-8 anyway. The group laughs, then Chewie makes his noises, which causes Rey to say that he's right and that they need to get back to the capital and make sure that things are settled there before they head back to the base. They all get onto the Falcon and fly away from the battlefield. They get to the capital and we'll see both Poe's X-Wing and the Shadow on a large landing pad, and they quickly find Rose and Beaumont, who is sporting a new and improved metal arm since the last time we saw him. They're standing and talking with an older man. When the group reaches them, Poe shakes his hand and calls him Minister Bonteri. This is Lux Bonteri from Clone Wars. Lux thanks them for helping to liberate Onderon from the First Order. Rose points out that just because they're gone right now, that doesn't mean they'll stay away. Lux says he knows. He's lived through more than one war like this, and worlds like his always get caught in the middle, and that it won't end until one side wins. If one ever does win a war like this, he adds. Beaumont asks if there's anything he needs them to do before they leave. Lux replies that they just need to rebuild and hope that next time the walls hold better. Rey says, hopefully there won't be a next time. Lux says that he hopes she's right, but in his experience, there's always a next time. Poe says that a few of the Resistance fighters are going to stay and help rebuild, but they have to go. Lux wishes them luck and thanks them again. As they walk away, Lux asks Rey and Finn if they're Jedi while pointing at their lightsabers. Rey smiles and says that they are, at which Lux smiles, reminiscing that an old friend of his was a Jedi and that she was one of the best people he'd ever known. She saved his life more than once, and them being there or to help reminded him of her. It's nice to know that after all this time, I can still count on the Jedi to come to my aid. Rey and Finn smile as he thanks them again, and then they get on the Falcon with Chewie, while Rose, Beaumont, and K4 ride with Keela on the Shadow, and BB-8 goes with Poe in his X-Wing. Keela asks Poe if he wants to race back to base. Poe says that he's game, and so does Chewie, and the three of them jump into hyperspace at the same time. We go to Snoke's palace and see Hux reporting to Snoke via hologram. He tells Snoke that the Resistance is fighting, but anytime they take one world away from them, there are 3 more that they lose. Snoke tells him that's not good enough, and that he wants the Resistance crushed. Hux would bow and say that he is doing everything in his power, but it is difficult without one of their stronger weapons, Kylo Ren, leading the charge. Hux says that last time he saw Ren, it didn't seem like his heart or his head were in the fight. Snoke says that Hux should leave Kylo Ren to him. Whatever he thinks he sees will be dealt with soon enough, and he should turn his focus back to the task at hand. Hux will bow again. The hologram would turn off, and Ben would step out of the shadows, his face hard. He's favoring his aside as though he has a broken rib, and we can tell that the year since the Battle of Crate has been hard on him. Snoke tells Ben that his patience is wearing thin. Ben apologizes, not looking Snoke in the eyes, saying that he won't fail his master again. Snoke draws his lightsaber and points it at Ben, and then uses the Force to painfully bring Ben onto his knees, saying, I should hope not. It would be a pity to kill such a gifted apprentice. But if you do, perhaps your sister would do better. Ben finally looks Snoke in the eyes, though since Snoke is still using the Force on him, it takes effort. Ben says, I swear, Master, you won't need her. Snoke finally lets up, Ben bows and leaves the throne room as Snoke smiles. It's clear that he knows how much Rey means to Ben, and he knows that implying Rey will go through anything like what he's presently enduring will keep Ben loyal to him. We'll see Ben in his dark room. He looks like he's trying to concentrate and keeps calling out to Rey, but there's no answer. He tries again, but there's still no answer. He realizes he can't reach her, and he begins to weep in pain and alone. We go to the Resistance base on Kamar. The Resistance has made themselves at home since the previous film, with there being more ships and X-Wings and equipment all over the ruins. In the back of the ruins, more in the jungle, we see Keela, BB-8, and Maz watching as Finn spars with young Obi-Wan Kenobi. This will be a cameo by Ewan McGregor. Maz is coaching Finn, saying things like, "Move your feet," or "Don't look at me, look at him." Obi-Wan will also instruct some, but his instructions are full of sass and almost taunting. We see Rey sitting on a fallen tree in the background. She looks like she's meditating, but there's clearly something bothering her. Poe walks up and sits by Keela. He asks who's winning, to which Key responds that so far it's been pretty even, and that his little brother is holding his own. They watch the fight for a bit until Finn disarms Obi-Wan. Poe and Keela clap for him while BB-8 beeps happily. Rey is broken out of her meditation by Obi-Wan saying, "Finally!" She sees that Finn has won and walks over to them as Obi-Wan transforms into K4, who tells Finn that he was starting to get tired. Finn would shake his head at K4 and then ask Maz if he did well, to which Maz would respond, "I gave K4 as much information on Master Kenobi as I could for him to be a perfect copy. Obi-Wan Kenobi was one of the greatest swordsmen in the history of the Jedi, and you just disarmed him. You did excellent." Rey would smile at Finn with pride, but he can tell there's something bothering her. He asks Maz if she knew Obi-Wan, and Maz would say, "I have known a great many people in my lifetime." Before they can inquire further, Maz would go on to question why Finn didn't try to use the Force to end the battle sooner. Finn would say that the lightsaber comes easier to him than the Force. Maz would tell him that he must master both to truly become a Jedi, and that he needs to think of something that balances him so that the Force can flow more freely through him. Finn thinks, but before he can say anything else, a ship flies overhead, and Beaumont comes towards them saying that Leia and Luke want all of them to come back to the ruins. The group starts to walk back to the base, with Finn and Rey hanging back a little. Finn tells Rey that he knows there's something bothering her, and that he's felt it weighing on her for months. Rey tells him that she hasn't been able to reach Ben since the Battle of Crate. She's been trying, but it's like there's something blocking their connection, and she's worried. Finn asks why, and Rey replies, "Because there's never been anything that could block our connection. But now it's like there's this massive wall and I can't break through. I'm worried that Ben put it there, that he's trying to keep me from talking to him. Like maybe he believes if we talk too long, he might want to come home." Finn takes Rey's hand, saying that he knows it must be hard for her to be unable to reach him, and asks if she thinks it's possible for Ben to truly come back and leave Kylo Ren behind. "I hope so," says Rey, to which Finn replies that he'll help her any way he can. Rey smiles at him and lays her head on his shoulder, but then BB-8 comes back towards them beeping like crazy. Finn and Rey would share a look, with Finn saying, "Whoever was on that ship has got him excited." They run towards the base and see Lando coming off the ship. He's limping and walks with a cane. Finn and Rey walk to Poe and Keela as they watch Luke, Leia, Chewie, and Maz greet Lando. Rey will smile and say, "Uncle Lando!" Poe and Finn both look like they recognize him, or at least the name, though Finn's look says that he's feeling a bit more than a passing recognition. But Key looks confused and asks who that is. Finn asks how she's never heard of Lando Calrissian, who was a smuggler, a businessman, and a war hero, to which Keela would respond that, Unless someone put a bounty on the old guy's head, I didn't pay much attention to smugglers or businessmen, and until Poe joined the Resistance, I didn't care that much about any heroes, war or otherwise. Leia beckons them over. They all head towards them, and there's introductions all around, with Finn, who is still looking at Lando curiously, getting introduced as Poe's adoptive brother. Rey hugs Lando, with Lando saying that he's so happy to see her after all this time. Leia takes Lando by the arm and leads him inside, asking everyone except Rey, Luke, and Chewie to give them a minute. We cut inside the base as Rey, Leia, Luke, Chewie, and Lando sit in a private room. R2 and 3PO are there as well. Luke turns on a holotable and a hologram of Han appears. Leia lays Han's dice on the table, telling Lando that they didn't want to have a memorial without him. Lando tells them that he appreciates it, and goes on to say that Han was one of his best friends. Han knew all of his secrets and scams, and was a large part of him becoming the better man he is. Luke says that he wishes they could give him a real funeral, but Rey would point out that in a way he had one when Starkiller Base was destroyed. But Luke would say that wasn't much of a funeral, to which Lando would respond that being buried by an exploding planet-sized base would be the way Han would have wanted it. Chewie would make sad and almost angry noises. Leia would look solemn and say, "You're right, Chewie. He wouldn't have wanted it by Ben's hands." The mood in the room gets even more somber than it was. Rey still clearly thinking about the fact that she can't reach Ben. Lando takes a deep breath, then picks up the dice, hands them to Chewie, looks at the hologram with a small smile, and says, "Goodbye, you old pirate." Cut back outside, Keela, Poe, and Finn are hooking up Lando's ship to refuel, Key teasing Poe that she won the race, and the three of them having a sweet family-type moment. Finn asks Poe what he knows about Lando, and Poe tells him that beyond what he's already told him, all he knows is that he lives on Bespin, which was hit hard when the First Order rose to power. From what he's heard, Lando has spent the last several years rebuilding Cloud City. They start to move away from Lando's ship. Keela asks Finn why he's so curious, but before Finn can answer, Rose and Beaumont run over to them in a panic. Poe would ask them what's going on, and Rose would say, "The First Order!" just before everyone has to duck under blaster bolts. They all look up and see a squad of TIE fighters, led by Phasma, raining down on them. The first ship taken down is the one Lando arrived on, and the explosion blows everyone onto the ground. Finn quickly gets out his lightsaber and starts defending the others from incoming bolts. K4 and BB-8 come to Poe and Key. Key looks like she hit her head, while we see Beaumont shielded Rose with his metal arm, so they aren't badly hurt. Poe gets up quickly, and after checking on Key, he starts telling everyone to get to their ships. He looks at Beaumont and Rose and tells them to get Generals Skywalker and Organa and get them out. Keela's still a little out of it, so he asks Finn to stick with her. Finn nods, then Poe and BB-8 head for their X-Wing. They manage to get into the air just before Phasma's TIE takes out the remaining wings on the ground. We see Rey, Leia, Luke, Chewie, their droids, and Lando coming out of the base. Luke and Rey with their lightsabers out, trying to protect those still on the ground, while we might see Leia using the Force to push a TIE into the path of an X-Wing's blaster fire. They're being led out by Rose and Beaumont, and they're heading for the Falcon. Lando sees Finn defending not only Keela, but just about everything and everyone around him. And a strange look comes to Lando's face. We see Maz at the ramp of the Falcon. She already has it running and is urging everyone to hurry up. Rey will pull Lando onto the ship and then yell at Finn to get Key and K4 out on the shadow, to which Finn would yell that they're right behind them. As the Falcon takes off with Chewie and Lando at the helm, Finn pulls Keela and K4 onto the shadow. We would see Lando ask Chewie who Finn is. Chewie would respond, And Lando would say, yes, I can see that he's a Jedi, and clearly he's working for the Resistance. Chewie would respond again. This response would elicit a look from Lando, who would ask, how close is he to Rey? The answer would be interrupted by blaster fire as Luke would get on the one functioning gun, saying, let's see if I remember how to do this. We go to the shadow. Keela, still looking out of it, would be telling K4 what to do while Finn manned the guns. Just as it looks like everyone might get away, the shadow gets shot down. They start to go down over the jungle. We might cut inside as they're going down and have Finn say, I've got a bad feeling about this. And Keela either giving him a look or shouting at him, no kidding! Poe starts to go after them, but Leia orders him to help get the fleet out of danger. They still have the blockade of Star Destroyers and other First Order ships to get through. Both Rey and Poe would say something about not wanting to leave them behind, but Leia promises that they will find a way to help Keela and Finn. Rey's not happy about this, and neither is Poe. We would see him looking at the smoke trail the shadow left. BB-8 would beep wildly, almost like he's panicking. Poe takes a deep breath, then closes his eyes and flies off into the space battle. The battle would be standard Star Wars fare, with X-Wings, transports, and TIE fighters flying all around and shooting at each other with some accuracy. Lando would have a moment with Leia and Chewie where he tells them that he's missed this, which would get a head shake from Leia and words from Chewie that make Lando respond, don't worry, I won't let my fun get us shot. The last part of the battle we would see would be Poe going into hyperspace, BB-8 still beeping worriedly at him, and he'd say, don't worry, buddy, we'll come back for them. Phasma would report to Hux, telling him that they have secured the base, and only a few Resistance fighters managed to escape. Hux would respond that some of those ships have already been dealt with by his fleet. Phasma would ask if any made the jump to hyperspace, to which Hux would respond, enough that this is not a true victory, but it is a start. As soon as he cuts his communication with Phasma, he gets one from Snoke. Hux bows and asks what he can do for the Supreme Leader. Snoke says that he sensed someone with the ability to wield the Force was on the ship his men shot down. He'll get specific about which ship so that we know it's the Shadow. He tells Hux to bring the survivors to him, as they will be the perfect final test for Kylo Ren. Hux bows again and tells him that it will be done. Down on Kalmar, we see the crashed Shadow. Inside, K4 is trying to wake up Keela. He will call her Mum at one point, clearly panicking. She finally comes around and asks what happened. We crashed, K4 would say, and rather spectacularly. We're all alive. Dad would be proud. I don't think we'll be able to salvage the Shadow, though. Keela looks at the damage and says, we'll see about that. I can always repair my ship. She rubs her head and then sees Finn. He's still unconscious. She asks why K4 didn't do anything for Finn, to which K4 would reply he gave Finn a shot of Bacta and that he would be fine. His priority was Keela. Key would smile at this and then tell K4 next time he checks on the Space Wizard first. They hear movement outside. K4 says that it's stormtroopers. Key tries to wake Finn, but he's not responding. The troopers get closer. K4 activates the guns, but those are quickly taken out by Phasma. Keela, who knows Finn's backstory by now, looks at Finn and then K4 and tells him to hide. We go outside the ship as the stormtroopers set explosives and then blast the bulkhead open. Key, who now appears to be alone, holds both her hands up and says, So, is it torture or firing squad? Phasma points her gun at Keela's head as the troopers take her weapons and pull her to her feet. Phasma asks if Key is alone. Key won't respond, but then Phasma would press her blaster to Keela's head and say, "Whoever else is on this wreck, come out now or I'll turn this girl to paint." Finn suddenly comes out and barks, "Get away from her!" Phasma would call him their elusive traitor, and Key would give him an angry look as the stormtroopers grab him. Finn would tell Keela that he's sorry, but he wasn't going to let her die for him, to which Key would respond that now they're both going to die. Phasma would say that Key's right before taking them out of the ship. We would stay on board as the stormtroopers leave. We'd go into the floor and see that Finn, still unconscious, is in a smuggler's compartment with a flashing communication device. We'd see the Resistance meeting up with a larger ship that allows them all to dock. Poe and Rey are both clearly worried and upset about leaving Keela and Finn behind, but both Luke and Leia tell them that right now the Resistance needs them both there. They'll find a way to help Finn and Keela, but right now they have to make sure that the Resistance survives. Luke, Leia, Maz, with a knowing glance back at Poe and Rey, and Chewie would all walk away, talking about finding a new base. Lando would act like he's going to follow, but would actually hang back. Rose and Beaumont come over to Poe, Rey, and BB-8. Beaumont asks if they think Finn and Key even survived the crash. Rey says she knows they did, but they're in trouble, and if they don't do something, they're not going to be alive to be rescued. Rose points out that their generals / Rey's masters and / family just told them not to do anything. But she adds, sometimes orders aren't the best things to follow. Beaumont would add that their instinct counts for more in this case. Poe and Rey share a look. They're clearly thinking the same thing. Rey tells Beaumont and Rose that they don't have to come, but Rose would cut her off. "They're our friends too. We're coming." Beaumont asks for a plan, and that's when Lando steps in. He tells them that he'd come to the base to honor a friend, and that this would give him his chance. Plus, what are rules to an old smuggler? This gets a bit of a chuckle from the others, and Poe thanks Lando, but Beaumont would remark that he didn't hear a plan during Lando's little speech. Lando then directs them to get on the Falcon, saying that she's the one ship in the galaxy that's beaten this kind of evil before, and if it's a rescue they're planning, the Falcon makes the best escapes. They all move towards the Falcon, except Rey. She's eyeing Lando curiously. She asks why he's really helping them, and he tells her that her boyfriend reminds him of someone he couldn't help, and that maybe if he helps Finn, he can settle the past in his mind. Rey hugs him, and then gets on the Falcon. Lando sees Maz watching them from across the room. He salutes at her. Lando gets on the ship as Maz says, "May the Force be with you." On board, Rey's in the pilot's seat. Poe has taken the co-pilot spot, but Lando smacks him with his cane and says, "She can have Han's seat, but that chair is either Chewie's or mine, and Chewie isn't here." Poe takes the hint and moves, and then the Falcon takes off and leaves the docking ship. We cut back to Finn in the smuggler's compartment as he regains consciousness. He holds his head for a second and then notices the blinking communication device. He activates it, and it's a hologram of Keela. The recording of Keela tells him that he's in a smuggler's compartment and how to get out, which he does. Then the recording says that if he's hurt, K4 should have come out of hiding by now and will take care of him. But Finn doesn't see K4. And after the recording tells him about the stormtroopers outside, he says, "They must have gotten K4 too." The recording tells Finn not to go back to the base. "This place is crawling with the First Order by now. Go to the coordinates I've programmed into this. You'll find something that Poe, Rey, and I have been working on for you." He'll hear the stormtroopers in the background, and the recording quickly tells him to get back to the Resistance and not to worry about her. The recording ends and then displays a map. Finn takes a deep breath, gets his lightsaber in his hand, and then consciously gets out of the remains of the shadow. We go to Snoke's palace. Phasma and Hux are forcing Keela and Finn into a cell. Hux will smirk at them and say, "The Supreme Leader is looking forward to meeting you." Key will say that, "You won't get anything from us," and Hux would chuckle at this. "I hope you're right, because I'm looking forward to watching you die." Hux would walk away while Phasma hangs back and looks at Finn. "I truly hope the Supreme Leader allows me to dispose of you personally." And then she would walk away. Finn would whisper, "I've got a bad feeling about this." Keela would look at Finn and whisper, "That's not surprising considering this is the stupidest thing you've ever done. I told you to hide." Finn would look at the door. Something around his throat would flicker slightly. And he would whisper with K4's voice, again, John Boyega getting to use his natural accent, "I wasn't going to let you wind up in this cell alone." Key would tell him that because he looks like Finn, every single person in the First Order, except maybe Kylo Ren and Snoke, wants him dead more than Rey or Leia or Luke because he's a traitor. K4 shrugs, grabs her hand, and says, "I wasn't leaving my mom alone in this place with these monsters." Key suppresses her smile and then tells him that when they get out of this, she's reprogramming his logic circuits. K4 would chuckle and they would sit and await their fate. We will pull out through the security camera and see that Ben is watching them. Their conversation was quiet enough that he didn't hear them. We still see them whispering, but he can't hear them now, is how we'll prove that. But he is watching them. On the Falcon, Rose and Beaumont are having a cute moment together by running a diagnostic on Beaumont's arm and making sure that there's no damage from the attack. Rose reminding him that it's an arm, not a shield. Poe is trying to keep his cool, but he's clearly losing his mind with worry. BB-8 nudges his hand. Poe rubs his dome and tells him not to worry and that they'll get their family back soon. We go up to the cockpit with Rey and Lando. Lando is quizzing Rey about the people they're looking for, and Rey tells him all about Finn, Key, and K4. When she talks about Finn, Lando notices how fondly it is. Rey says that he's the first real friend she ever had. Since she met him, she has grown to love him very much, and she can feel that he's still in danger, even if the First Order hasn't found him yet. Lando assures her that they'll find him, and Rey looks worried. "I hope so." Back on Kamar, we see Finn trekking through the jungle, being very careful to avoid stormtrooper patrols. He finds a cave, goes inside, and soon finds a small ship. It's really small, but Finn looks thrilled about it. Finn gets inside. He looks a little nervous and then mutters, "You've got this. Just do what Poe and Rey taught you. If they built this for you, they would have made it easy." He gets it started and begins to take off, but that's when the stormtroopers attack. Finn manages to get out of the cave and avoiding most of the blaster bolts. He breaks the atmosphere, but there are TIE fighters waiting for him. He has no weapons, but is managing to outmaneuver them pretty well. He's no match for the TIEs, though, and soon one of them gets him in their sights. That's when the Falcon comes out of hyperspace. Rey sees Finn's little ship and shouts for Rose and Beaumont to shoot the TIEs. It takes them no time to destroy all the TIEs in the area. Finn docks his little ship on top of the Falcon. The minute he's on board, he tells Rey to eject his ship so they can get out of there. She does, and they quickly go back into hyperspace. Everybody comes back to see Finn. Poe hugs him, and when Rey comes back, it looks like she might not let go of him. Finn sees Lando and looks curious, but before he can ask anything, Poe asks where Key and K4 are. Finn says he doesn't know. He was knocked out during the crash, and when he came to, Key had put him in a smuggler's compartment, left him a message, and told him where the little ship was. But he figures that the First Order has them. BB-8 suddenly pipes up, and Lando asks, "What's got into him?" Poe says that when Key and K4 joined the Resistance for good, K4 gave BB-8 a frequency to track if he was ever captured, and K4 would have activated it the minute the First Order took him and Keela. BB-8's tracking thing pops out, and he displays the planet that Snoke's palace is on. Rose and Beaumont look nervous, but say they're with them no matter what. Poe looks at Rey with pure desperation in his eyes. Rey starts to head for the cockpit, and the others follow, with Rose asking where they're going. Rey looks at her. "We're going to get the rest of our family back." We go to Snoke's palace. Phasma and Hux are forcing Keela and Finn into the throne room. Ben is standing next to the throne with his lightsaber ignited, and he glares at Finn. Hux and Phasma force them onto their knees and hold blasters to their heads, while Snoke smiles at them. He welcomes them to his palace. Keela would hold up her bound wrists. "I don't feel very welcomed." This would make Snoke chuckle. Snoke's gaze goes to Finn, and he looks confused. He asks Phasma if these were the only ones she found on the ship. Phasma says yes, and then Snoke would look at Ben with a nod. Ben would hold out his hand in a force choke manner, but nothing would happen to Finn. He looks confused and then does the same to Key. She immediately begins choking and gasping for air, with Finn shouting for him to leave her alone. Ben looks at Snoke, who nods, and he stops. Keela takes several deep breaths, with Finn repeatedly asking if she's all right. She nods, and then Finn would turn angry eyes on Ben. "You would try to kill a weaponless and currently defenseless woman? What if she was Rey? Would you do this to your sister? Your sister who loves you and wants to save you from the darkness this monster has dragged you into? Would you let this monster choke the life out of her?" This gets a reaction from Ben. He throws Finn into the wall with the Force. Snoke looks pleased while Key begs for him to stop, even trying to get up and stop him herself, but Hux keeps her in her place. Finn would keep going. Keela would be telling him to shut up or to stop the whole time he talks. "Rey believes in you. She knows that there's good in you, and she knows that you can be saved." Ben stabs Finn in the chest, but nothing happens. He pushes him into the wall so hard that the wall begins to crack, but Finn is still talking about Rey, and even says he knows that he can't talk to her anymore. Snoke takes out his lightsaber and points it at Keela's throat, and tells her to make whatever Finn is stop. Keela hesitates, but then Hux starts to aim for Finn's head with a blaster, so she shouts, "Override command 1 LVU!" K4's true form is revealed. Ben looks furious, but also curious, as though the lengths K4 went to surprises him. He tosses him back at Keela. K4 asks Key why she did that, and she says she wasn't going to let them hurt him. Snoke looks angry and yells that Phasma brought him a droid instead of their Force-sensitive traitor. He tells her to prepare to find the real one, and Phasma bows and leaves. Key yells that they'll never find Finn. She made sure of that. This angers Snoke, and he uses Force lightning on Key. K4 transforms into Rey and begs Ben to stop him. Rey practically screams that Keela is her friend and that she's innocent. Something is clearly happening in Ben's mind, but he doesn't move. Snoke sees the look on Ben's face and stops. He tells Hux and Ben to return the prisoners to their cell. He'll deal with her, Keela, later. Ben grabs Key and starts to take her out of the room. Hux grabs K4, who has returned to his droid form, and Hux and Snoke lock eyes. There seems to be an understanding between them as Hux drags K4 out of the throne room. The four of them reach the cell. Ben pushes Key inside, then uses the Force to remove her binds. Key says that Rey told her about him, what he was like when they were kids. Ray even had her convinced that he was worth saving. Before Keela can say anything else, Hux forces K4 into the cell. Ben looks at the droid and asks why he went through all that, and K4 says it was to protect his family. Ben looks like he's going to ask something else, but then suddenly, Hux pulls out his blaster and shoots K4 in the head. Keela screams, and Ben looks stunned as Hux closes the cell door. He looks at Ben. By the orders of the Supreme Leader, can't have a deceptive droid roaming around. He smirks at Keela. That's what happens to those that protect the Resistance. And then he walks away. Ben looks through the door at the crying Keela before walking away with a completely unnerved look on his face. He leaves 2 stormtroopers at the door as guards. Keela holds K4 as he begins to shut down. He quietly says, "Tell Dad that I love him. Mom, and BB-8, and Finn too." Keela says that she will, and K4 tells her to remove his head plate and keep the frequency going so that BB-8 can find them, which Keela does. K4 tries to say that he loves Keela, but he shuts down. He's dead. And Keela sobs over him. We go to the Resistance ship. Luke and Leia have discovered that the others are gone. Chewie doesn't seem that surprised. Maz is also in the room, and she's smiling at Luke and Leia's surprise. Luke says that he's going after them, but Maz tells him that that would be a bad idea considering where they're going. "Snoke," says Leia. Maz nods, saying they knew Rey and Poe would want to go back for those they care about, and Rose and Beaumont are loyal to their friends. Chewie makes his noises. Luke would respond that everyone keeps bringing that up. Leia looks at her brother. "It's true, Luke. Rey is learning from her master. You shouldn't have told her about that time on Bespin." To which Luke would respond that charging in without a plan cost him his hand, and it wasn't a lesson he wanted Rey to learn. Leia would smile and say that charging in with only your friends and a weapon sounds like a plan Han would have come up with, and made work. Luke would still be unsure, saying that it's not the Jedi way. Maz would chuckle and start to walk out of the room. "Perhaps the old ways should change. It's not like they've done us much good thus far. And as for Rey, Poe, and the others, you both need to trust that they know what they're doing. Besides, Lando's with them. What could go wrong?" Chewie makes his noises as if to say, so much. We go back to the Falcon. Poe is with Rey in the cockpit. Poe thanks her for taking this risk when she didn't have to. Rey puts her hand on Poe's shoulder and says that Key and K4 are her family too, and she would never leave her family behind. Rose and Beaumont are inventorying and preparing the weapons, and they're kind of bickering over how many weapons is enough. It's a really cute moment between the two. Lando is sitting at the Dejeric game table with Finn. Lando asks Finn if he wants to play a game, but Finn shakes his head no. He looks at Lando's cane and asks what happened to his leg. "I wish I could say that it was just from getting old, but that's not the case." Finn questions further, and Lando goes on to tell him that it's a wound from the worst day of his life. Lando tells Finn that the First Order had just taken power, but he thought his family would be safe on their little home in the clouds. His wife used to tell him that power would always seek to destroy the peace, but he never wanted to believe that. "I mean, we didn't blow up 2 Death Stars for nothing." He would go on to say that eventually his wife turned out to be right, and the First Order came with a vengeance. They took out all of his fighters, all of his security, and then they moved on to his family. Lando would pull up a holographic image of him, a woman, and 4 children, 2 older boys, a girl, and a young boy. Finn would focus on the young boy and the woman. The flashes of memory from the previous film of him being ripped out of someone's arm would flash by again. Lando would say that his wife and boys tried to protect the little ones, but nothing could stop the First Order. He thought for a moment he might be able to save his youngest, but there was an explosion and it took part of his leg and knocked him unconscious for a few days. When he came to, his family was gone, his city in the clouds was mostly smoke, and the First Order was taking over the whole galaxy. Finn is still getting flashes of memory, and Lando notices the strange look on his face, asking him if he's okay. Before he can answer, Rey says that they're going to use Han's trick to avoid detection, the landing at light speed trick from The Force Awakens, and that they'd better strap in. Finn mutters that he hates this trick, and then sees the way Lando is looking at him. Finn asks if he misses his wife. Lando says, "Of course, that woman was the best person I had ever known, and special in more ways than one." Again, before Finn can question further, Rey shouts for everyone to hold on tight. "It's going to be rough!" Everyone braces for impact as Rey brings them out of hyperspace. They see the rocky, mountainous terrain, and she pulls up just before they hit the side of a mountain, though it does scrape the bottom of the ship. They manage to land without crashing, but it's still a very rough landing. Everyone would get off the Falcon, Lando remarking that this old girl still has a few surprises in her. Poe sees that Beaumont and Rose have several explosives with them, and Rose says that they're at the heart of the First Order, with presumably most of the top leadership there. They would be fools if they didn't try to bring this place down. Poe nods and tells Finn to go with them. Rey and BB-8 will go with him to find Key and K4. And then he asks Lando to stay with the ship in case they need to make a quick escape, which Lando marks that they will. "We always do in a situation like this." Rey tells Rose not to worry about her and Poe. If she can bring the palace down, do it, and Poe nods in agreement. But no one else seems to like that idea. Everyone says goodbye, with Rey and Poe both hugging Finn and telling him to be careful, and he tells them both to do the same. Poe, Rey, and BB-8 head off. BB-8 is leading them with his antenna out. Rose, Beaumont, and Finn start to leave, and Lando tells them to call him if they need help. Rose and Beaumont head on, but Finn hangs back and asks Lando how his wife was special. Lando would smile and say that she was like him and Rey. Finn smiles at Lando and promises that he'll be careful, and they'll be right back. Finn runs after Rose and Beaumont as Lando watches them go. "May the Force be with you, son." Inside the palace, Rey and Poe are carefully following BB-8 through the corridors, trying desperately to avoid being spotted by stormtroopers and Red Guards. We would cut to Finn, Rose, and Beaumont. They're also sneaking as best they can, setting explosives as they go. We see Lando on the Falcon. He's looking at the holographic image of his family and focusing on the youngest boy. Then he looks in the direction Finn, Rose, and Beaumont went. Back inside the palace, BB-8 rolls in front of Key's cell. The two stormtroopers point their blasters at him, but then Rey brings her lightsabers to one of their necks, and Poe points his blaster at the other and tells him to open the door. The stormtrooper does, and then Rey uses the Force to slam them both against the wall, knocking them unconscious. Poe and BB-8 go into the cell. Poe hugs and kisses Key, and then notices that K4 isn't moving. BB-8 bumps him like he's trying to wake K4 up, but then Key tells them that he's gone. Poe looks upset, and BB-8 makes sad noises. Rey tells them that she's sorry, but they really need to go. Keela nods, then disconnects K4's head from his body, saying she's not going to leave him behind. She straps the head onto her back and then grabs the stormtrooper's blasters, and they start running. As they do, Rey hears Ben's voice calling out to her in her head. He sounds like he's in pain and desperate. Rey stops. She tells Keela, Poe, and BB-8 to keep going and to get to the Falcon, and she'll be right behind them. They hesitate, but then alarms start blaring, with Poe saying they know that they're there, and Rey shouting at them to go and that she'll be fine. They run one way while Rey runs in the other direction. Outside, we see Finn feel what Rey is doing, even saying under his breath, "Rey, what are you doing?" As Beaumont and Rose set more explosives. Suddenly, blaster fire rains down on them from stormtroopers on the palace walls. Finn quickly draws his lightsaber while Beaumont uses his arm to block the bolts, and Rose returns fire. Rose looks to the side, smiles, and then says that she has an idea. She pulls Beaumont along, and Finn is about to follow when Phasma jumps down in front of him. She tells him that she was about to come looking for him. "How fortunate you decided to come to me yourself." Finn readies his lightsaber. She draws her spear and asks him if he's prepared to die, to which he would respond, "Not today." And they would begin to fight. Back inside, Rey has made her way to the throne room. She sees Snoke on his throne, Ben kneeling next to him with his head hung. Rey holds up her lightsaber, practically shouting for Snoke to let Ben go. Snoke laughs at her, saying that he's not holding him, and Ben gets to his feet, still not looking up. Rey says that he is. He and his darkness have such a hold on her brother that not even their connection can breach it. Snoke would say that she's right, and that he used the dark side to cut them off from one another, and now that she's there, it would be time for Kylo Ren to prove himself. Ben finally looks up. His eyes are hard, and he leaps at Rey, igniting his lightsaber as he does. Their fight is fierce and furious, with Rey just trying to get through to Ben, and him desperately trying to ignore her. Snoke would rise from his throne, using the Force to throw both Rey and Ben off balance by pushing them and throwing things at them. He would also be studying Ben throughout the fight, and would notice how Ben is not going quite all in. He would shout, "Are you my apprentice or are you a weakling?" This would infuriate Ben further, causing him to go much harder on Rey. We would cut to Poe, Key, and BB-8. They're mowing down stormtroopers as they try to escape the palace. They get to the lower level. If they were to look up, they would see the lightsaber flashes from Ben and Rey's fight above them. They are soon surrounded by Hux, stormtroopers, and Red Guards. Poe looks at them and kind of smirks. This is where the fun begins. Keela also smirks at the troopers and guards, asking, "Who's first?" BB-8 also beeps in a way that could be interpreted as, "Come at me, boys!" And they all begin to fight. Back outside, Finn and Phasma are still fighting. Phasma would comment that he's lasted longer than she thought he would, but then she would do a bit of crafty footwork that knocks Finn on his back. She kicks his lightsaber away and steps on his wrist to stop him from force pulling it back. She would stand over him and say, "But you're still weak." We would see flashes of Finn from throughout the trilogy, him breaking away from the First Order, various moments of him with Rey, Poe, Keela, Beaumont, and Rose, learning from Maz, her words about finding something that balances him, many flashes of his and Rey's moments alone together, even some of them training and some tender moments that the audience wouldn't have seen. They all flash by, and under his breath, Finn would say, "Rey." Suddenly, Finn shouts and unleashes a force blast, which pushes Phasma off of him, and he gets to his feet, saying, "I'm not weak. I'm a Jedi." Phasma would recover quick from his outburst of power. She looks ready to fight again, and she laughs. "That's why you'll never win, FN2187. The Jedi were never willing to fight as needed to win." Suddenly, Phasma would cry out in pain. We would see the tip of a small dagger protruding through her shoulder. She would start to bend over, revealing Lando, sticking his cane in her shoulder. He would look mad and say, "I'm no Jedi, and the First Order is not taking my son away from me again." Finn force pulls his lightsaber to him. Lando pulls his cane out of Phasma and kicks her towards Finn, and then Finn would stab her in the stomach, saying, "And my name is Finn." With Phasma falls to the ground dead, Finn and Lando would take a second to breathe and then hug each other, but their sweet moment would be interrupted by stormtroopers surrounding them. Finn would hold up his lightsaber and use the Force to pick up Phasma's spear, then get into position to protect Lando. But suddenly, large blaster bolts start to take the troopers out. It's Rose and Beaumont in a TIE fighter. Inside, Beaumont is nervous about flying, but Rose says that if Poe and Finn can fly one, so can they. Beaumont would remind Rose that Poe and Finn crashed that TIE. They would continue to fly around, shooting stormtroopers wildly, and eventually hitting one of their explosives and causing a chain reaction that everyone inside the palace would feel. We'd briefly see Poe and Keela as the palace shakes. They grab each other's hands and then resume the fight. We'd also see Rey, Ben, and Snoke. Rey would smile and look at Snoke. "Your reign is coming to an end. Even now you can feel the tide turning." She looks at Ben. "As I can feel it changing in you. If you were truly part of the dark side, you would have struck me down already. But you haven't, and you won't. It's not too late, Ben. You're not too far gone. You have good in you. I can feel it. All you have to do is let go of your hate and your anger." Ben pants heavily. He acts like he's going to strike at her. Rey doesn't look like she's going to block it, but instead he yells loudly and extinguishes his lightsaber. Rey would smile, but Snoke looks furious. The palace would shake again as he commands Ben to kill Rey, but Ben looks at Snoke and says, "No." Snoke stretches out his hand. Ben's lightsaber is pulled out of his hand towards Snoke, and he uses his lightsaber to cut Ben's in half. He ignites both ends of his lightsaber and tells Ben that he's made his last mistake. Rey stands in front of Ben, but with a flick of his hand, Snoke throws her across the room and holds her against the wall. Rey looks like she's in pain, and Snoke isn't even having to hold his hand up to keep her there. Snoke would tell Ben that he had such high hopes for him, but he should have known that the grandson of Vader would fail him. He zaps Ben with Force lightning and then throws him out the window. Ben lands in the middle of Poe and Keela's fight, much to the surprise of everyone. But they're all still fighting for their lives, so the fight continues. Hux looks at Ben. "I'll deal with you once these two are dead." Snoke's attention turns to Rey, and he begins to zap her with Force lightning as well. Outside, Rose and Beaumont are still using the TIE fighter to its fullest potential. Finn can feel the trouble Rey's in, so he tells Lando to get back to the Falcon and to get ready to take off, reminding him to be careful. Lando would shoot a stormtrooper in the face and tell him that he's got this. Finn would smile and then run into the palace while Lando heads for the Falcon. In the throne room, we see Rey drop to her knees. Her eyes are closed and she's panting. Snoke tells her that he is going to put her through so much pain that she will beg to join him before the end. Rey, quietly or possibly telepathically, calls out to Ben, asking him if he's alive. She opens her eyes and sees him lying on the floor, with the fight raging around him. She says that she knows he's hurting and tired, but she needs him to get up. Ben says that he doesn't have any strength left. The world around him seems to freeze. Ben looks up and sees the Force ghost of Han standing in front of him. Han would hold out his hand to help Ben up, but Ben said, "I deserve to die here. I don't deserve your help." Han still offers his hand. Ben looks at him sadly. "I killed you." Han looks at his son. "I know." Ben looks stunned. "Why would you want to help me?" And Han smiles. "Because you're my son, and I love you. I know you weren't in your right mind, and I could see the regret the moment you did it. I forgive you. But now you need to get up and help your sister and her friends." Han extends his hand again. Ben looks at it. "I'm sorry." Han smiles. "I know." and Ben finally takes his hand, and Han pulls him up. The world snaps back into time as Ben starts to get up, and once he's on his feet, we see Rey smile. She asks him to help her friends, but he says he has no weapon. She would tell him that she can manage without. She puts her lightsaber behind her back. Ben puts his hand behind his back, and when he brings it out, he's holding Rey's lightsaber, which gets the attention of everyone in the fight. Them being able to pass the stuff through their connection is a thing. With everyone's eyes on him, Ben would do the Han shrug and start taking out the Red Guards. Poe and Keela would look stunned and a little confused. Poe asking when he joined their side. Keela shrugs. I guess his sister got through to him, but so long as he's killing the bad guys and not us, it doesn't matter why. Back in the throne room, Rey would rise to her feet. Snoke would try to shock her again, but she would do the redirecting trick she learned in the pit on Octu. Snoke would look surprised. No Jedi could do that. Only those who serve the dark side could do such a thing. Rey would tell him that he's wrong, that she is a Jedi and does not serve the dark side, nor does she fear it or him. Snoke, pure anger and rage across his face, would switch to his lightsaber. Rey would have a bit more trouble now, as it's more of a case of avoiding and dodging, which is a little difficult when he has a double-bladed lightsaber. Down with the other fight, Keela, Poe, and Ben seem to be winning. BB-8 is even getting in on the action by zapping people. Ben would be too focused on the Red Guard to see Hux taking aim at him. But before he fired, Poe would punch him, push him towards Keela, and Key would shoot him in the gut, looking him in the eyes. That's for K4. Ben would finish off the Red Guards as the palace would shake again, this time beginning to crumble. Poe would remark that Rose and Beaumont are doing their job too well, and then they would hear the echo of Rey crying out, as though she nearly lost her head or had been thrown across the room. Poe and Key would look at Ben. Keela would tell him to go help Rey and then get out of the palace before it collapses. Poe adding that they'll take care of all the stormtroopers. Ben nods and Poe and Keela run off with BB-8. Ben puts his hand behind his back, and when he brings it out, the lightsaber's gone, and then he starts to climb the wall back towards the throne room. Rey is beginning to lose her fight, even with her lightsaber returned. She looks tired and beaten up as Snoke prepares to bring his lightsaber down on her, but then his blade is blocked by a blue lightsaber. It's Finn. He force pushes Snoke away and helps Rey to her feet. Snow laughs. You two aren't nearly enough to match my power. That's when Ben climbs through the window and stands by his sister and Finn. Finn looks at him and then at Rey. She smiles, which tells Finn everything he needs to know. He tosses Ben Phasma's spear, and the three of them face down Snoke, with Rey saying, "You're not nearly enough to beat all of us." This fight would be very visually similar to the Red Guard fight from The Last Jedi. It's also where not depicting Snoke as a fragile old alien in a bathrobe would help, as him being able to fight 3 Jedi, one of whom is very experienced, at the same time and not fall immediately, would be impossible the way he was originally depicted. The fight would last for a while, with Snoke gaining the upper hand more than once. Rey having to redirect Force Lightning, Finn having to stop things from hitting Rey and Ben with the Force, and Ben saving Finn and Rey from losing their heads more than once. After Ben gets thrown very hard against the wall, Finn manages to cut Snoke's lightsaber in half. Rey starts to strike at him, but he uses the Force to freeze her in place and push Finn away. Rey looks like he's about to choke the life out of her, but then Finn uses the Force to throw Snoke's throne. Snoke catches it with the Force, splitting his concentration. Ben sees the opportunity and throws the spear at Snoke. It lands in his back, which causes Snoke to lose his hold on Rey. She follows through with her strike, and Snoke falls dead. There's a sigh of relief from all three of them, and Ben looks like a great weight has just been lifted off of him. Finn makes sure that Rey is all right. She gives him a kiss and says she's wonderful. Ben comes over to them. Rey hugs him and tells him that she's so happy he's back. Ben tells her that he's sorry for everything he's done. Before Rey can respond, the whole palace begins to break apart. The three of them use the Force to protect themselves, creating a shield around them. And then they see the Falcon flying above them, with Rose and Beaumont's TIE fighter hovering above it. Rose and Beaumont jump out of the TIE and start to get in the ship through the Falcon's top hatch. Poe and Keela are on the ramp. They throw down a couple of cables and pull Rey, Finn, and Ben up onto the ship. Poe closes the hatch. Key tells Lando that everyone's on board and they need to take off. They fly away as the whole palace and much of the area around it explodes. They get away from the planet and enter hyperspace. Rose and Beaumont come to check on them, giving Ben suspicious looks, but Rey assures them that it's all right. Rose and Beaumont hesitantly nod, and then Rose says that they're going to contact the fleet, and they walk away. There is a moment of peace on the Falcon, with Finn hugging Poe. "Thanks for coming to get us, brother." Poe smiles. "We don't leave our family behind." Rey and Ben would also share a sweet hug. Poe would hold Key close. She, Poe, and BB-8 say goodbye to K4 while looking at his head. Finn would make his way to the cockpit with Lando, and he would smile. Finn says he doesn't remember much about his past. He doesn't even remember his real name. But he does remember a woman and a city in the clouds that felt safe. Lando would smile at him. He'd sort of chuckle. "Maybe forgetting your real name is a blessing. You'll probably want to stick with Finn." This causes Finn to ask what his real name is. Lando would reply, "Quinhan," and explain that he was named for Finn's mother's father, Quinlan, and his best friend, Han. Die-hard fans of Star Wars might make the connection of Quinlan to Quinlan Vos, who appears as a background character in The Phantom Menace, as well as a couple of episodes of Star Wars The Clone Wars. He survived Order 66 according to canon, since he was mentioned in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, so it is feasible that after his escape, he had a daughter, and that daughter married Lando sometime after the Battle of Endor. Finn gets a look on his face, like the name is familiar to him, and he looks at Lando. And Lando looks at him. "You remember the name, don't you?" Finn would nod and say that he's right, he does want to stick with Finn. Finn Calrissian. They get back to the docking ship, and there seems to be a celebration happening. Maz meets them in the hangar and says that without their leadership, the First Order has already begun to crumble, and that they're already getting reports from the resistance leaders like Hux Bonteri and Jason Syndulla that say some stormtroopers are dropping their weapons and just surrendering. Luke and Leia come toward them, Chewie a little distance behind them. They see Ben and hug him, a hug which Rey joins in. Ben breaks down crying, apologizing repeatedly for what he did. He sees Chewie behind them and says he's so sorry for what he did to Han. Chewie would look away from Ben. It would be clear that Chewie doesn't forgive him in this moment, but he's also not going to try and kill him. Lando walks Finn over to Chewie and introduces him as his son. Chewie questions Finn, who nods. "It's true." And Chewie hugs them both, which results in laughter from Finn and Lando. We see Rose and Beaumont looking around at the celebration with shock. Beaumont would respond he didn't think they would actually survive, to which Rose would respond that she always knew they would. Rose would grab Beaumont and they'd start kissing like crazy, Beaumont shedding a few tears, which Rose wipes away. Poe puts his arm around Key and says their quiet life is fast approaching. Keela smiles. "So long as I have you, whatever life we have is enough." They kiss and BB-8 whirls around them. Finn and Rey find each other in the midst of the celebration. They're both clearly happier than they've ever been. Finn smiles at her. "I love you." Rey smiles back. "I know." And they kiss. There's much kissing, hugging, and celebrating all around. And we finally see our final hug of Rey, Poe, and Finn. We'd cut to some time later. We see Finn and Rey on Bespin, Cloud City, which seems to be getting rebuilt. They receive a holographic transmission from Poe and Keela, telling them that Ben has helped them root out the last of the First Order's forces. The galaxy is officially free of them. Keela adds that Ben is planning to come and visit them on Bespin as soon as he gets Luke and Leia settled on Kalmar, Finn remarking that he's surprised they would want to go there. Rey shrugs and says that after a year there, that base was the closest thing either of them had to a home anymore. Poe asks how Chewie and Lando are doing. Finn says that they're both adjusting to life without Han, but they seem to be doing all right now that they have each other and him and Rey to lean on. Rey asks what's next for them. Poe says, a life, which causes Key, Rey, and Finn to smile. Poe adds that they're about to set coordinates for Bespin if that's all right with them. Finn says they never need permission to come visit their family. They just have one thing to do before they get there. Keela and Poe seem to know what he's talking about, and Keela wishes Rey and Finn luck. Finn gives her a look. "Maz told me there's no such thing as luck." Keela chuckles. "We overthrew the First Order and didn't die. That sounds like we have the best luck in the galaxy." Poe smiles and says they'll see them soon. The transmission ends, and Finn puts his arm around Rey. They step outside. In a garden, there are several children and teenagers waiting on them. Rey stands in front of them while Finn hangs back. During this oncoming speech, we'll see multiple glimpses of our characters. Maz at her rebuilt palace, where several members of the Resistance are drinking along with her regular clientele. Rose and Beaumont working with Lux and Jason to rebuild the galaxy. Ben in the jungle of Kalmar with Luke and Leia behind him. Ben has a new lightsaber. It's blue and he's practicing with it. We also see Han's Force Ghost watching him, standing with Luke and Leia, the original trio united again. We see Chewie and Lando on board the Falcon. Chewie puts Han's dice back in their proper place, then a gasket blows and he and Lando hurry to fix it. And finally, before we'd finish and cut back to Rey and Finn, Keela sitting on Poe's lap on the rebuilt Shadow. BB-8 is integrating K4's head into the ship's system. We hear something that sounds like K4's voice, which would cause BB-8 to whirl around and beep happily. Poe puts his hand on Keela's stomach while they kiss. She seems to be a few months pregnant. They look completely happy and at peace. This is the speech Rey is giving during the glimpses. She says, "I know that for many years we've all had to hide ourselves and our connection to the Force for fear of the First Order. But now the First Order is gone and there is no reason to hide. This does not mean that the darkness is gone, for the dark side is as ever present as the light, but the light is always stronger. I will not lie to you. The dark side is tempting, frightening, and dangerous. But Finn and I will train you to ignore its calls and not to fear it. The Republic, the Empire, and the First Order are dead. The galaxy is rebuilding, and so too must the Jedi." This is where we would cut back to her from all of our glimpses of everybody else. "It is time for a new order to begin." She draws her lightsaber, as does Finn, who now stands by her side. Rey looks at him. They smile at each other. And then they look back at their students, and Finn says, "So, let us begin." Their students draw their lightsabers. They all ignite them. And so concludes the Star Wars sequel trilogy, complete with John Williams' closing fanfare. The Rise of Skywalker is the most frustrating film. It could have been absolutely amazing. It could have been the ultimate culmination of 40 years of Star Wars. I know that J.J. Abrams and co. had the best of intentions with The Rise of Skywalker. I know they went into this with a lot of ideas, and the cluttered aspect of the movie proves that none of those ideas were thrown out. I know that they really did want to make a good movie, but somehow, somewhere, something got lost. The Rise of Skywalker not only didn't make much sense plot-wise, it went with shock over substance, wasted talented actors and actresses, and pushed fan-favorite characters to the background. It also nonsensically brought Palpatine back as a disfigured clone, forced an unnecessary Ben-Rey romance plot, and killed off Leia and Ben, rendering Han's death in The Force Awakens completely meaningless as he only put himself in that situation to save Ben. I know they didn't have much of a choice with Leia due to Carrie Fisher's death before filming was complete, but there had to be a better way. All of this culminated in a movie that is confusing at best and downright stupid at worst. I'm just gonna say it. This is a borderline bad movie. It's not quite there, but it's way closer to the line than any Star Wars film should ever be. I genuinely feel like having most of the old cast, as well as Ben, survive the film, but all sort of step back while Rey and Finn begin to train the new Order of Jedi is the most fitting way to end the sequels. Paying homage to the originals without straight up copying them or having to lean on the old characters for every bit of enjoyment or emotion allows this film to stand on its own as part of the overarching Star Wars narrative story. And since K4 is hopefully an enjoyable character for most fans, his death will serve its purpose of not only forwarding Ben's return to the light, but also proving the threat to Keela, as well as being a satisfying way for him to go out, protecting his family. In the end, I feel that everyone gets the ending they deserve. Ben gets redemption and gets to spend the rest of his days with his mom and uncle, while also learning from/with his sister. Finn has found his family, both chosen and biological, as well as purpose in training the new generation of Jedi. Poe gets to sail off into the stars with Key and BB-8 to a life they've always dreamed of, complete with a child on the way, while also staying close to his brother and dear friends. Rey gets to carry on her family legacy alongside the man she loves. The original characters also come to fitting ends, with Luke and Leia helping to keep Ben in the light, and Chewie and Lando teaming up on the Falcon, almost as a way of honoring Han. Maz, Rose, and Beaumont also get proper endings, with Maz returning to her palace on Takodana, and Rose and Beaumont helping to rebuild the whole galaxy, rather than having all of them just disappear from the story like they did originally. The ending I've come up with also allows for the possibility of continuing the film series even further into the future with these characters, possibly through one of Finn and Rey's students, or Keela and Poe's child. This is Star Wars. If you leave it open to possibilities, anything can happen. At the end of all this, the word I would want on people's lips is satisfied. Obviously, not everyone will agree with how I think the sequel should go, but I genuinely believe that this would be the best ending for this era of Star Wars. So, in conclusion, Star Wars has been around for over 40 years, and it's something that I don't believe will ever truly die out in popular media. With spin-off movies that I personally think are better than the sequel trilogy, video games, and a whole crop of TV shows currently on and coming to Disney+, Star Wars is something that will endure in popular culture so long as people are willing to pay money for it. Its impact on popular culture is nothing short of astronomical. Everything references Star Wars in one way or another. There are whole websites and YouTube channels devoted to people's love of Star Wars. I will link a couple of my favorites down in the description. But at the end of the day, Star Wars is also something that can infuriate its fan base to the nth degree. And sadly, that's what the sequels did. As I said in the intro in part 1 of this What If, I don't think the blame can be placed on any one person. I think there's plenty to be shared among everybody who had something to do with the sequel trilogy. When it came to the sequels, it was like a perfect storm of things that ultimately led to everyone biting off more than they could chew. The sequel trilogy just couldn't catch a break. As I have said throughout this, I don't hate the sequels. The actors and actresses involved are all very enjoyable. The only things the sequels did right was the casting. And they do exactly what they're told to in their roles. Even when it didn't make much sense, they tried to do their best with the mess they were given. Adam Driver, Oscar Isaac, and John Boyega especially were fantastic. Kylo Ren / Ben was written, in my opinion, very flat, but Adam Driver brought everything he possibly could to that character. And Oscar Isaac is the very reason Poe existed beyond the first 15 minutes of the Rise of The Force Awakens. And I'm not even going to get into how amazing I think John Boyega was as Finn, for him to be relegated to along for the ride status in The Rise of Skywalker, because it makes me mad. The complete derailing of a perfect storyline that was set up for him in The Force Awakens, getting utterly ignored apart from a whisper we never get to hear, only inches The Rise of Skywalker closer to being a bad film, in my opinion. It's still not there yet, but it's very close to that line. There are aspects of the sequels that I really do like. I genuinely enjoy The Force Awakens as a whole and feel it was a great starting point with a lot of great ideas, and that sadly didn't get built up on in the following films. I can enjoy the visual style of some of the action pieces in The Last Jedi, and for all its faults, The Rise of Skywalker does have a couple of funny moments, emphasis on a couple, and it brings back Lando, who is one of my favorite Star Wars characters ever. And again, even though The Rise of Skywalker kind of drops the ball, John Williams' score is always fantastic. Unfortunately, I can also see why people don't like the films, the second and third especially. A lot of parts don't make sense. Characters act contradictory to how they were previously characterized. They reveal things and then walk them back so that they mean nothing, and new characters, Ben and Rey being the exception, are introduced just to be relegated to the sidelines, or worse, the background. I get that they're not the main characters, but neither were Han and Yoda, and they still got complete and full character development. I understand why all these things together angered many diehard fans and frustrated the casual viewer. I understand why the people in charge made the decisions they did regarding the sequels, but they still could have done what they wanted without doing a disservice to the actors and actresses involved or the people that they were trying to reach / please with their decisions. What I have written proves that. So why they chose to give into the storm instead of changing course is beyond me. All of this being said, it's unfortunate that the sequel trilogy turned out the way it did. I doubt we'll see most of, if any, of these actors again in the future. I'm positive that at least one of the actors never wants to return to the Star Wars universe again, or at the very least never wants to return to Disney again. Which is a shame, because I think there was a lot more to be explored with these new characters, and they had great actors and actresses to play them, so it's doubly sad. Because we'll never really get to see these characters' full potential. In the end, but here's the thing. In the end, the sequels achieved their purpose. Keep people talking about Star Wars enough that the franchise continues to make absurd amounts of money. I don't hate the sequels, but I don't love them either. I believe they could have been done so much better than they were. But I still love Star Wars, and I can't wait to see what comes next from that galaxy far, far away.